Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And we are back. It's been a long break, everybody. We thank you all for your patience getting through the holiday without us. And it's an exciting night tonight for Watching Comics Podcast, because for the very first time ever, we've got 99 problems, but Mitch ain't one. Because tonight, Mitch is out. And I am Jake. I am your second favorite podcast host, and it is a pleasure to be with you tonight. But I'm not flying solo. We did not leave Chewbacca running without Han, because tonight we have a very special guest with us. My good friend, my longtime friend, we have known each other a great long time. Nick Miller is coming to us. Nick, if you say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. So in your analogy, am I Chewbacca or am I Han?
In my analogy, you are whoever you want to be, and I will be a porg sitting on the dashboard and pressing the record button. And that's how that goes. Because I make, this is the week where everybody's going to find out just how much Mitch really does. And people sometimes like, oh, you're so funny when you're self-deprecating. I'm like, I am not any of those things. I'm legitimately useless to this show. And so everyone's going to see just how badly we need Mitch this week. But Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, and let's get this show on the road and let the people know who you are.
Yeah, let's do it. So, Jake, we have known each other for a long time. I mean, you're, really more my brother's friend than my friend, right?
Yeah.
But we knew each other. I remember, my mom used to babysit you when you were in, fifth grade, sixth grade, something like that. You come over to our house and hang out and play video games and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the long and winding road that leads to watching comics probably begins in that basement room next to your bedroom.
Probably.
My lifelong love affair with nerdery.
So you really have me to thank for your life.
I do. And that's a thing I say at the dinner table a lot. My wife could tell you that.
Yeah. And my road into this venue, this nerdery has been an interesting one. A few years ago, my friend Adam got me into comics, and I started this YouTube channel called Imperious Arcs. And we made videos for almost a year talking about all sorts of comic stuff. And then I fell into this group called the Gotham Central Podcast, and I've been I wouldn't say semi-regular host. I'd say whenever my schedule worked out to do it once every 7 months host. I've been on there a few times. So, but yeah, I've really been reading comics for probably the last 6 years or so. Got into it, when I was 30. So we're different at that age, but in that regard, because you've been doing comics for a while, but I've fallen into them, and I really like them a lot. I read them almost every day.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask that. So Nick is, to be clear with everyone, Nick's younger brother, Brandon, is still one of my closest friends, has been one of my very best friends since I was 11 or 12 years old. And to be frank, Nick was that cool older kid that was around that I probably subconsciously picked up more off of than I meant to. And so, Nick, I actually was going to ask you if you were secretly reading comic books in your room all that time that I was next door, because I never got that vibe when we were younger. So that actually makes me feel less crazy to hear that it's a more recent thing for you.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't get into it till I was about 30. Yeah. I don't know if you know of the tabletop game HeroClix. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. My friend Adam, who I did the YouTube channel with, he got me into this board game, and it's basically like chess with superheroes is a good way to put it. And you collect all these little figurines, and you play, you battle each other or whatever. And we always met in comic shops to play these games, and so that's kind of what turned me on to it, was looking, because right about the time that I started playing that was when the New 52 launched. And so that was kind of a good jumping on time for me to start reading and getting into comics.
And that's good for anyone who's listening that you want to get into comics. you're interested in it, but you don't know where the jumping on point is. Nick references the New 52, and this is just as the comic. I mean, we're both comic guys, Mitch and I. As the guy that, I think that's more my wheelhouse, and movies is more his on this equation. I always encourage people. They do these jumping on points like every 18 months in both Marvel and DC Comics, and they're always a good point to get in and just start reading and learning. So that's awesome to hear somebody actually say that that's where they did. I know those back rooms you're talking about where they play games. It's like that's the room that my son is afraid to walk through to go to the bathroom when we go to the comic book store.
Yeah,
because
there's regular comic book store smell, and then there's those rooms which is just like,
right.
Like high school locker room times 12 kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's like torn posters with old Dragon Ball Z pictures on them, and there's that standard kind of decor, and there's like a Daredevil starring Ben Affleck poster people have been throwing things at. And
I kid you not. The first shop that I started playing one, and this was in 2011, 12, around there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big poster of Kingpin from the movie in the shop.
Oh man. All right. So I could sit and just like discuss and reminisce all night, but what we're here for tonight, the real meat of it, what we're here to discuss is something that I have actually really hoped we could get to on this show for a while. And so in our production meeting that included Nick this week, Nick suggested that we discuss this specific topic, and I was all in on it. So Nick, you had the idea. Do you want to do the honors of introducing the concept, or would you like me to? How do you want to do that?
Oh, I mean, sure. I'll be glad to do that and take that. I mean, it's your podcast, but I'm taking over, so it'll be
do it.
Nick show from here on out.
That's actually, that's actually true. I was telling Nick before we started recording that literally this week, 1 year ago, Mitch had me guest host on his old podcast, and now we're here. So I'm assuming that by this time next year, it's Watching Comics with Mitch and Nick. So it's been a lot of fun, everybody. This is Nick, and like all stepdads, he's cooler. So here you go.
Yeah. So, For those of you in the comics side who actually read comics, a big missing component from the Marvel line for the last, what has it been, 2 years, 3 years? For quite a while has been the Fantastic Four. And Marvel recently announced, comic book wise, that they are going to be relaunching the Fantastic Four book. And so I talked to Jake and I was like, hey, maybe, with this Watching Comics and, you guys have done fan casts and stuff, why don't we cast the Fantastic Four for whenever Disney Marvel finally gets the rights back, whenever that's going to be. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We are going to fan cast and then, talk about the characters and the directors, and then, maybe a few, plot points or movie ideas that we would like to see the Fantastic Four go on. Right? Yeah,
and that's perfect. And that idea thrilled me so much because it is increasingly looking, man, I was it Comcast that kind of almost ruined all of my hopes and dreams. Was it them that made that bid? Oh man. But then Disney came back and was like, no, we have cash money and we're upping the bid. So it is now once again looking like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, all of it is going to revert to Marvel for the film rights soon. Relatively speaking soon. And so I thought this is perfect.
It's not 2020 that it will officially go to Disney, but still, that's soon.
In time for what, like phase 5, maybe.
Sure.
As they, like Avengers 6, Enter the Fantastic Four, and so. But the thing is, Marvel's been so clear that they want to go with this universe for so long. And this is going to be such a perfect way to extend the life of it by bringing in these really rich, deep catalogs of characters that they've never been able to touch. And so, and Mitch and I have talked before about how they took the relative unknowns of the Marvel universe and made them the A-listers. So now that they're getting back the traditional A-listers, we've seen this a little with Spider-Man, there's going to be so much more area to go with there. So let's do it. Let's jump in. Let's talk Fantastic Four. And I really think I debated the structure to go with here, but I want to start at the beginning, so to speak. And when announcements are getting made about movies, the first thing they come out with is kind of who's going to cast the vision and who's going to steer the ship there. So I thought great first question for tonight, Nick, would be, who do you think should direct a Fantastic Four movie in a perfect scenario to enter the MCU? Who do you think should direct that thing?
Okay. I have two choices that I have written down here.
Okay.
And I think it kind of depends on where they would take the Fantastic Four and how they would use them. My first choice would be if you're kind of a more conventional, happy, kind of a popcorn flick, kind of movie where you don't think a lot, right? You just go in and enjoy the action and that kind of stuff. I would say let's give it to the guy that has already made two really good Fantastic Four movies in Incredibles and Incredibles 2, and let Brad Bird try it.
Oh man, you nearly stole my line there, let alone my pick. Go on, tell us why Brad Bird.
Well, I mean, he obviously has, he gets this hero dynamic, and he gets the family that works together, and eventually, there's problems with the family, but then they work it out, and they're a team, that solves the problems and stuff. I think that he would be give him a shot, and he's already proven to, Disney, that he can direct that type of movie. So we're just taking it from cartoon to, live action. He's not my number one choice, but if they're going to go in that kind of more, fun, lighthearted, kind of mood, then he would be my pick.
So I actually, and I'll just butt in and keep it brief because you hit a lot of my reasons there, and then I'll let you give your number one pick. I only did one pick for this, and most of these things on here I had only one pick, but I did Brad Bird as well, and The Incredibles was a big factor in that. So I'm not, and you've already touched on that. I think for me, the other factor is that I still think of the Fantastic Four, even in modern stories where they can get a little bit darker, where they can get a little bit more heady with the stuff. I still think of the Fantastic Four at its core and in its origin as this very Silver Age kind of thing. And it's very much kind of in that same vein as the original Star Trek for like classic sci-fi, where even when things get dark, even when things get, more modernized storytelling, even then at its core, there's this element of hopefulness and optimism about what we will become as people and about what we will accomplish with, just what we're capable of. And the thing that sells me on Brad Bird is not just The Incredibles, but also however you felt about the movie Tomorrowland as a concept and some of the things he wanted to do with that film. And he speaks very clearly in the lead up to that movie about wanting to really revive that sort of hopeful, optimistic sci-fi. And I think that to me is the bigger piece, the better piece for why I think he'd be so good. Because I think that not only would he get the family element of it that is so vital, it is so important, but I also think that he would get, am I embarrassing myself? Did he do Tomorrow? Oh, he wrote Tomorrowland. He didn't direct it, but when I think about that, I think he's got what it would take. He did direct Tomorrowland. Man, I'm sitting here looking MDB as we talk. I think he would do that optimistic sci-fi that I really want to see at its core. Not that it can't get dark and not that it can't be emotional, but that I want to see that dark and that emotion and that family all lead into that sort of return of the Silver Age sci-fi. That's me. So who's your number one pick then?
Okay. So when it comes to Fantastic Four, I have read all of their stuff since Jonathan Hickman. I don't know if you've gotten into that at all. Have you? His run is great. But yeah, it is the second best comic book thing I've ever read. And so in saying that, there's a lot of, kind of sci-fi and time travel and space and, just really deep, complex issues where you would read a comic and you would be like, you would literally say, what did I just read? And it's not until like 3 or 4 issues later that it finally starts to come together. That's what he's really good at. And for me, and this is a homer pick because I love him so much, I would select J.J. Abrams to direct a Fantastic Four movie if they're going to go something with time travel, and if they're going to do something, you know, going into micro universes, and if they're going to go to kind of some of these deep, weird places, you know, that well, you know, in getting it, we're going to get into, you know, kind of storylines maybe we'd like to see picked up, and I'll kind of talk more about it then when we get there about why I would like J.J. Abrams. But he's already proven that he can do sci-fi and do sci-fi very well with the Star Trek movies that he's done, with Star Wars. I mean, and then when it comes to action, he's done a couple of the Mission Impossible movies. So, I mean, he can do all of that. And he is a guy that I would totally 100% put my faith in to direct this franchise.
I think JJ's a good pick because he's going to do Hickman. You know, the reality of Jonathan Hickman is that it's like literally 3 years later in a completely different, what you thought was an unrelated comic book, he'll resolve something that you thought he left unresolved.
Oh, yeah.
And
he's
I mean, like, oh yeah. And his Fantastic Four is really the beginning of this epic that doesn't end until years later with Secret Wars.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you know, we got sold Secret Wars as all these other different things, and it was a great series. It was the rare good crossover. And yet at the end of it, I finished it and I put it down and I said, you know, that was just a Fantastic Four story, and that's okay. That's great.
Yeah, 100%. You can see it from the start of Fantastic Four through FF and Avengers and New Avengers through Secret Wars. Like, it's just a story about Reed and Doom, like the entire thing. And it's amazing.
It also, to go deep into this, it contains my favorite, the climax of Secret Wars contains my favorite Fantastic Four moment probably ever, where Reed and Doom are having their showdown. And so for anyone who's never read this, if Secret Wars, the short version is that Dr. Doom recreates reality with himself as God, and he basically makes himself Reed also. So he takes Reed's family from him, Mr. Fantastic's family from him, and makes himself the center of that family and makes himself God. And at the end, when they're fighting and they're having their throwdown, Mr. Fantastic says, you know, that's the thing about you, Victor, is that you've always had this impossible potential. And then when you got the powers of God, you just chose to be me. And it's like, I mean, I get like goosebumps talking about that scene because it captures the dynamic of those two so well.
Is that on the page where it's like checkered?
I think so, yeah. And
they're like talking between them, and it's like this big checkerboard where like the white checkers are Reed's face and the black Doom's face. It is so amazing.
Yeah, so like now that we're done, I'm going to go upstairs and go find it when I'm done with recording this and read it again. Speaking of Reed, I think Mr. Fantastic is the first character I want to ask you. Who would you cast in that role for Mr. Fantastic?
Okay. So there has been a lot of buzz on the internet for a long time about John Krasinski playing Reed.
Yes.
And while I absolutely love him, and I think he would be a great, if they kind of went for that traditional Silver Age family, the Brad Bird version that, you know, we talked about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he would be a great choice for that. In my opinion, the only difference between Reed Richards and Tony Stark is the fact that Reed Richards has a wife and kids. They are both superior level intellects. They are super selfish. They only think about themselves. I mean, there are so many situations, especially in Hickman's run, where it's like, well, if he would have just talked to Sue, like if he would have let them know, like this problem, this crisis would have been averted. If he would have talked to his daughter, she wouldn't have left him to go live with Doom, you know, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
He wasn't being honest. And so my pick, I've been watching a lot of Handmaid's Tale with my wife, and I'm going to go with Joseph Fiennes for Reed.
Okay.
He's, you know, taller, lankier kind of guy like Mr. Fantastic needs to be, but he's also got this air of confidence, but he's also can be, I don't know if creepy is the right word, but but I mean, here's this guy that is like literally the smartest person in the universe. Well, not anymore, but I digress. And, and he just has this air about him, and he's so cocky and he's so confident that his intellect can get him out of any situation. And he's a big villain, so to speak, in the whole book, just because he doesn't really think about everyone else. And I think he can really capture that. Joseph Fiennes, if you've watched Handmaid's Tale and just how he is in that, I think he would be a great pick for that type of read.
I really like that pick because I like that you're thinking creepy's such a good word for Reed that doesn't quite nail it, but it's so close, because I've always read Reed Richards as this kind of aloof character that his intelligence almost makes him inhuman in some ways, and not in it's not always bad, but I feel like he's almost like he struggles to connect with the people around him. And he's so smart, he doesn't always make great choices. Does that make sense?
Yes, and the only person that he can connect with is his 4-year-old daughter, Valeria, because of her mutant ability. She's like just as smart as he is. And like they really connect. And also, I want to mention that my cast for this is purposely a little bit older.
Yeah, so I did the same, and that's where I was going to go, is because for me, what I don't want is an origin story about the Fantastic Four going up into space, getting bombarded with cosmic rays, and coming back down and discovering. I don't want to see Ben Grimm scream as he becomes the Thing again. I want to see a family that already exists, and that includes Sue and Reed's children, Franklin and Valeria.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's why I purposely picked a little bit older. And also, whenever we get to who I picked for Doom, he's even a little bit older. So I kind of wanted to make them, about the same. As well. But yeah, I'm with you. I wanted Val and Franklin to be a part of this story, and almost in a way, we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so who is your pick for Mr. Fantastic?
Man, I went Homer's on this one, and I was self-indulgent. I think that Ewan McGregor is a really underrated, and I don't mean underrated like people don't like him or think he can't do stuff, but it really comes down to, for me, I feel like the prequel Star Wars movies are good, but not, I don't think they're as terrible as people say, but I also think that there's so many missed opportunities. And one of them is, I see Ewan McGregor trying to bring depth to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he's acting off of Hayden Christensen, and he just has nothing to do with it. And I say what?
And George Lucas's script.
Right, yeah, and he's staring at it like, oh man, there's so much more. Yeah, and Obi-Wan could have been such a. So I really have wanted for years for Ewan to get the chance to redeem himself in the nerd community, and I think that he has enough range as an actor that he could step in there as Mr. Fantastic and really do a good job of bringing that aloofness, that disconnect from the people around him, that ultimately, though, masks how deep his love for the people around him is and how altruistic he is at the end of the day, once you get past the fact that his altruism is buried under this intelligence that makes it hard to find sometimes. And there's so many layers to that character. Mm-hmm. And I think Ewan's got the chops, and I want to see him use them. So this was a really self-indulgent pick for me. Yours is much more well thought out. Mine is very much, I just love Ewan, and I want to see him in that role.
That's totally fine. I mean, I did that with J.J. Abrams. So
yeah, that actually made me feel better when you picked J.J. Who you got for Sue, the Invisible Woman?
Okay, I have. This was the only one where I had two.
Okay.
Two choices. The first one, like my initial one, just with the look and I think how she is, was Bryce Dallas Howard.
Okay.
I think they turn her hair blonde, and which they may or may not do, right? But
right.
I think that she could do that. The other one, and this is again back to Handmaid's Tale, but only if they don't cast Joseph Fiennes as Mr. Fantastic, just because this show has kind of ruined their relationship, is Elizabeth Moss.
Okay.
And if if they kind of do some stuff that I would like to see them do with Franklin and Val, like she plays a very compelling mother and very emotional person in that show. And so I think, and I mean, she won all of the awards last year for her performance in Handmaid's Tale. So she's a fantastic actress who absolutely would, shine in this, cast of all-stars. So those would be my 2 picks.
I think I like the Elizabeth Moss pick a lot, and I like Bryce too. But I think that the Elizabeth Moss pick is really good because she really has. I haven't watched a ton of Handmaid's Tale, just because it depressed me so much, and I know that's its point. And I get it. Like, I didn't watch it and say, oh, this is crap, I'm sad now. I watched it and I said, this is too good at what it's trying to do, and I don't have the emotional stamina to do a whole season of it. So I actually did not finish the first season, but I'm very impressed with it. Yeah, I probably need to revisit it, and I like your pick. I also dove into television, and I thought one of the best mother performances I've seen, but in a very different way than I would want her used here, is Vera Farmiga, who played Norman Bates's mother on Bates Motel.
Okay.
And she's about the right age, that in the 40s there. I don't know how much of Bates Motel you saw. It was a show that I watched the first, I think, season and a half. And it's not that it was bad, but it's what I call it fell under the lifeline, where as my life gets more adult and more busy, there's a line that keeps rising for like where I have to cut things off and say, hey, that's really cool, I don't have time. And so there's so many TV shows, especially video games and stuff, that people are like, how have you not seen that? I'm like, 2 children.
It's true.
But right. But so in some ways, honestly, real peek behind the curtain here, this podcast is a way to have a legitimate excuse to go indulge in things that I love. But so I thought Vera Farmiga plays Norman's mother, and it's such a twisted role because she's abusive to her son in this really sweet way that doesn't look like abuse, and she can be so genuinely loving and motherly and then manipulate him so terribly that he ends up becoming a serial killer. And the power of that performance and the depth that she brought to the role of a mother, I think if we could take that depth and put it into Sue Storm, who is a very different kind of mother, that is not raising any serial killers that we know. But if we could take that complexity and ability to layer a performance and develop a character, and there's so many moments where she does so much without even lines, but just with body language, with proximity, with facial expressions. And she's such an all-around brilliant actress that she was my pick just because I wanted to see her opposite Ewan McGregor running the Fantastic Four, the two of them as kind of the core there as the Richards family. And I just thought she would make Sue such a strong character in her own right that didn't revolve around Reed. And she wasn't just there to be a reaction to him or to be the person that he's constantly failing, but to be an equal member of this family and bring some strength and depth to it. So that was my pick, was Vera Farmiga.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and I like it. I like, she was in, what was it, Up and Away? Is that what it was?
Yes. Oh, yeah. The George Clooney one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was fantastic in that.
That's right.
Yeah, it's totally solid pick. And again, I think the thing that as we're coming upon this, we're stressing the age. Like she's 45, a little bit older. That's a theme that I know I would like to see a more established. Even though we as the audience might not know their backstory, but let's have like parents and people that are a little bit older and a little bit experienced and have been dealing with their powers. And know how to function, right?
That touches on, I will not let this become the 45-minute soapbox that it easily could be. I just want to say that as I have entered my 30s as a nerd, one thing that I have noticed is so the best example of what I'm trying to say here is I miss Spider-Man's marriage, because Spider-Man, Peter Parker, when I was a kid, would mouth off to the villains the way that I mouthed off to everyone in my life. And I would say, that's a really cool character. I identify with this nerd that gets picked on that then turns around and smarts off to guys 3 times his size and saves the day. And then as an adult, I started reading those with a little bit more perspective, and I saw, I really love that Peter Parker is this guy who's trying to juggle having a career of some kind, being a parent, being a husband, being all these other things, and do the right thing with the abilities that have been given to him. And I just say that, like, I love the young comic book characters. One of the best new characters of the last decade is Miss Marvel, who is a teenage character. But I am at an age as a nerd where I want to read my favorite characters struggling with more adult problems, and I want to see more adult people. I love what they did with Superman up until literally, I think, this week, where he had a family finally, and, it became about him and his family. And so I'm with you on that completely. I want to see a more established Fantastic Four.
Yeah. Love it.
Okay, let's jump to The Thing, because this is one of my favorite comic book characters, and I don't even think I could tell you why. I just really love The Thing. So tell me about The Thing. Who would you get in that role?
Okay, I don't know, because I guess that image from the first Fantastic Four movie with Michael Chiklis, right, as The Thing, it's kind of a shorter, kind of stockier kind of guy where it was very practical, his suit, like it was him in the suit, like that was this picture that I had ingrained in my mind. And I know that they'll probably go with, like they did, which I didn't even see the new Fantastic Four movie, but where The Thing was totally CG.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that's the direction that they would go. I would like to see something a little practical, but they probably won't, because why would they? But the only person that I could think of was David Harbour, who is, the sheriff from Stranger Things.
Yes.
But he's just been cast as Hellboy, and he's going to be Hellboy. So I'm pretty sure that there's no way but literally he was the only one that's kind of this, could play this gruff kind of guy. And The Thing's story is so tragic.
Yeah.
Here's this guy that doesn't fit it anywhere. And then in Hickman's run, they actually, Reed figures out a way to turn him to a human, but he messed it up. And he is a man for 1 day a year. And he only ages during that 1 day when he's human for a year. So The Thing lives for like 5,000 years or something really sad and really depressing and really tragic. and I think that David Harbour, he kind of has that gruff and kind of sad and kind of, but also, hey, I'm big and I'm tough and I can go do the thing that I need to do, when I need to do it. And so, I don't know, literally he was the only person that I could think of for that role.
I like that pick, and you've actually, again, I'm going to stay away from this issue, but Hellboy is one of my very favorite indie comics characters, and if it can't be Ron Perlman, David Harbour is so good. So I'm actually not sad to lose David Harbour as the Thing potentially, but that's such brilliant casting. Who I went with was Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad. He played what was his name? I've lost his character's name. He's the bald, growly guy that is kind of the muscle. I'm pulling him up as we speak here. Man, this is like my favorite character. Mike Ehrmantraut. He played Mike Ehrmantraut on Breaking Bad and plays him currently on Better Call Saul. And he's got that like total blue collar character actor vibe. He can sort of growl at people. And yet, I don't know if you ever watched Community.
Oh, yeah.
But Okay, so I actually thought his character on that one season of Community he was on, Buzz Hickey, the teacher, I actually thought that character had a ton of depth to it. And he was this, like, in these moments you get to see this guy who is so mean and so gruff, but he's deep down a pretty good guy with some layers to him. And I thought Jonathan Banks as the Thing would bring the right amount of kind of fun, blue-collar growliness, but could also do those scenes that need the pathos, and they need somebody who can be tragic about being covered in rocks for the rest of his life. So I don't know. I really like Jonathan Banks, and I feel like since Mike Ehrmantraut, he's done all these other great character bits, but I kind of want to see him get his break there as well.
Oh, that's great. I like that. I like that guy.
Okay, so the other half of it, if you're going to have Jonathan Banks or whomever, I'm sorry, if you're going to have the Thing, looking at the wrong side of my list in front of me. If you're going to have the Thing, you have to have the Human Torch to play off of him. So who do you have as the Human Torch?
Again, one guy popped into my mind, and it is Justin Hartley, who plays Kevin on This Is Us. The good-looking white guy. I mean, there's a good-looking black guy, so. But I don't know, like, he just has this look to him, and he can definitely be cocky and fun, which you know, Johnny Storm is. You know, he just jumps around, and he's cocky, and he's, I don't know, seems really shallow, even though he's really not. And so, and David and Justin in his portrayal on This Is Us, it's kind of that same character where he's an actor and everyone loves him and he's super cocky, but then he also has this hurt and this struggle because he was a recovering addict. And I think that he could really bring, you know, some good acting abilities, but also that pretty boy, good looking guy that everyone wants to be kind of thing that the Human Torch is.
I like that pick, and I think that physically your guy matches better than mine. I actually went. This is the only other time I did this, but I went back to the Breaking Bad well, and I took Aaron Paul for the Human Torch.
Too.
Man, and I think that so you probably could say all the reasons. I think that Aaron Paul could do that likable bad boy thing. But again, with the Fantastic Four, it's not going to be a character quite as dark as Jesse. I don't think anybody's going to chain Johnny Storm up in a Nazi's basement. Or they could bring back the Hate Monger. There's a deep dive for you. Who was actually just a Hitler clone. But I digress. Yeah, I think that Aaron Paul could do that role a lot of justice. I say all that, and I think Chris Evans did a good job with this character. You know, there's some things, there's a few bright points in the old Fantastic Four movies, and he was one of them. Chiklis was another, honestly, and the two of them were, I thought, the best parts of those movies. And I'm so glad Chris Evans got his second shot with Captain America.
Definitely. He nails it. He nails both of them.
Yeah, he's good at this, man. Most people don't get to be one comic book character, let alone two. So I kind of want to combine, unless you want to separate them, but Franklin and Val, the kids of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, I tried to refresh myself on Val's history as a character, to give, like, sometimes I try to distill some things for our audience and just be like, hey, so now you can go into the movie in a year or two and tell your friends, hey, I know this about it. There's no way to simplify Valeria's origin as a character. And I say that as somebody that can explain to you the clone saga from Spider-Man and the death of Superman. And yet I tried to distill it's like she's from another timeline, but she's not, but she died, but she was born, but she's actually Dr. Doom's daughter, but Dr. Doom is really Reed in that reality, but it's not in this reality. And then they stopped her from being born, and then she was born. And I just gave up. So my first piece of advice to Marvel, because I know they're big fans, is don't do that. Don't normal birth. Franklin and Valeria, traditional children born the normal way or adopted or whatever, but no time travel involved in her birth. Who would you put in those roles though? Because kid actors can make or break a film.
Okay. I will be 100% honest, and I looked and thought, and I couldn't think of anyone for young Franklin. I just young Franklin, I say, because I'm spoiling. I have an old Franklin. We're going to do some time travel stuff too.
All right. Okay.
I couldn't think of anyone, and the only person that I thought of for Val, I think she's a little too old for what we would like to see.
Mm-hmm.
But it is McKenna Grace. I don't know if you know who this is. She's 12 right now. She was young Tanya Harding in I, Tonya.
Okay.
She's been in a bunch of she's been in a kid actress for a while. Shameless or not afraid to admit, I have watched Fuller House on Netflix, and she is one of the kids' friends.
Okay.
Whatever. I don't know.
Here's in my wheelhouse. She's in Mickey and the Roadster Racers. We watch that about 6 times a day in my home. So
okay. So I mean, she just, as she talks, she just has this air of someone that is a genius. Like she just kind of presents herself as a really smart and well put together little person. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you need with Val, because I mean, in the comics, she's 4 years old, and she's like having these deep intellectual conversations with her dad, who is, the smartest person on the planet. And like you need someone who has an air of confidence, an air of I'm smarter than you. Mm-hmm. I'm a genius. And so that's who I would say, even though, I'd like to see, that role filled by a, 4 or 5 or 6 year old. But if we don't have that, then we'll go to the 12-year-old McKenna.
Yeah, I was unable to find a 4, 5, 6 year old.
That's tough. I mean, they're not on IMDb.
I don't know how they're gonna really work the ages here, but I'm doing the casting. Marvel can do the rest. For Franklin, my first thought was Finn Wolfhard, who plays I can't remember the name of the kid on Stranger Things, the main kid who's got the thing with 11. Okay. And Finn is getting cast all over the place, so I actually backed off on that, and I went with, instead, adjacent to him, Noah Schnapp, who plays Will Byers on Stranger Things, because I think Will is the emotional core of that show, and even though he's not in a lot of the first season, what he is in, I think he greatly. He steals scenes that he's in. I think that he plays this character that can drive a show without being in it all the time. And I think that he would make a great Franklin. He's a little older than, we're not going, but I think he could get it done. Val was the one I was actually really psyched for my pick once it occurred to me, and it was an 11th hour thing. I mean, what is it? It's 11:28 p.m. right now, according to my phone. So, I mean, maybe 90 minutes ago, it finally, and I was ready to just tap out and say, I can't think of anyone. I'm going to go Bella Ramsey, who plays Lady Lyanna Mormont on Game of Thrones. She is, for anyone who watches Game of Thrones, the little girl that runs the Mormont family, and she shows up to like these councils and tells these grown men, this is how it's going to be. This is how we're going to do things. And she projects this air to people around her that are so much older and bigger and stinky men in medieval Viking gear. And she projects this air of course they're going to listen to me. And I think that she could nail Val as a character. She is a little bit older than Val is portrayed in the comics, but again, I don't know that we're going to get a dream pick for someone. And they're just going to have to do an open casting, call it a mall, and hope they get lucky.
Right, for sure.
Okay, this might be the most important bit of casting. Oh, go ahead.
Well, okay. So kind of harking to where we're going to, and I would love to see time travel.
Okay, yeah. You jump in and do your time travel bit. I want to hear this.
Oh, and also, you were talking about Val, about how her, story is really complex and stuff. Most people don't know that Franklin Richards is probably the most powerful mutant in the Marvel Universe.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that.
I mean, he is basically, Val was born because Franklin decided that she was going to be born.
That's right. That's how they resolved that.
He was so strong that I can't remember if Professor Xavier helped him or Reed helped him or if he did it to himself. But basically, he put a thing in his brain to make his powers so they weren't so strong. Like he forgot that he had them. I mean, he created in Hickman's run like a small pocket universe where Galactus is his herald. I mean, he is bonkers powerful. Like there's a Marvel theory going around that. Do you know Marvel Time? Do you know of Marvel Time?
No. Tell me about Marvel Time.
Marvel Time, basically, whenever we first started in, 63, 64.
Oh, you mean like the timeline of it and how they've adjusted it. Gotcha.
That it was basically for the first 5 or 6 years, everything seemed to have happened in real time. But then about 5 or 6 years in, then the timeline gets kind of weird. And now we have kind of figured out that it's about, to our Earth years of 1 year, it's about somewhere between 3 and 4.5 years Marvel time. So,
right.
4.5 years of our time is 1 year of Marvel time. And what happened was that started the same year that Franklin was born. And so there's this fan theory floating around that Marvel time exists because Franklin exists, and he doesn't want things to change. Also that whenever any character dies, they get resurrected because Franklin doesn't want them to be dead because he wants them, like, everything to be the same. That's why whenever the Fantastic Four status quo is changed, it has always come back, is because of Franklin.
That's kind of awesome.
It's this fantastic theory that I absolutely love. So anyways, in the Hickman run, future Franklin comes back to try and prevent young Franklin from doing stuff. And I know he's Magneto, but he's awesome. It's Michael Fassbender as old Franklin. You can't go wrong with this guy. He's fantastic. And it's a guy that's desperate need of saying, hey, fix your life, little boy. Like this air. And then my pick for an old Val is Eliza Coupe.
Okay.
She was in Future Man. Have you seen Future Man on Hulu?
I'm aware of Future Man, but I haven't seen it.
Oh my word.
Your brother has recommended it.
Oh gosh, it is hilarious. Anyway, again, she just has this air of I'm smarter than you kind of thing, and just how she talks. And I think that would fit very well with my pick of McKenna Grace. So anyways, sorry to kind of interject there and kind of.
No, that's perfect.
But those would be two picks for older versions of those characters from the future.
Nice. I like those. Where I was going to go next is I think the most important bit of casting is the bit of casting that was most screwed up in the original Fantastic Four movies, and that is Doctor Doom, who is possibly, I mean, it depends on the day. If you asked me, depending on the day, who the best villain in comic books is, I'm going to give you either the Joker, Magneto, or Doctor Doom. And I love this character, and he's so vital to the Fantastic Four. So who would you put in that role of Victor Von Doom?
Okay. So with Doom, you need a person that is charismatic, that is likable, but is also someone that you hate, all at the same time. And he's by far my oldest pick, and I know him and Reed's relationship might need to be changed a little bit. But I'm going to pick Bryan Cranston.
Ooh, that's so good.
He has this air of being like from Breaking Bad, this despicable, awful, horrible, scary person. But then, he's in stuff like Malcolm in the Middle, where he's a ridiculous dad, and I think like he would be able to blend those and be this guy that is demanding of everyone and expects so much, but then also vulnerable because he wants what Reed has, which is what he doesn't have. And I think that he would just be a solid Doom.
That's really good. I like that pick a lot. I also, Brian, you mentioned You mentioned Fassbender. I think that I may have said a few weeks ago on another episode that I'd pretty much take Fassbender in any role, or I implied it at least. Bryan Cranston is similar, and I just haven't had a chance to gush about it on this show yet. I've reached the point since Breaking Bad, and I was on board with Breaking Bad, but the moment where he got me forever, as he can do any role he wants, was actually an interview he did when somebody asked him, why are you doing this Godzilla movie when you could have had any role after Breaking Bad? And he just said, he's like, I'm going to take whatever looks interesting to me. And he said, I did Breaking Bad and I was really depressed. So I said, let's do a Godzilla movie. And the fact that he can bring that attitude to it, and he can say, you know what, I can bring this character to life. Here's Walter White. I can bring this character to life. Here's the dad on Malcolm in the Middle. And I can certainly scream while Godzilla steps on me. And so I say all that to say, my pick is not him, but I just wanted to really gush about how much I love that pick on your end. So I didn't go with, but I do like the internet's favorite person for this role is Mads Mikkelsen, who was Hannibal Lecter on the Hannibal TV show. And more recently, he was Caecilius, I think was his name, the bad guy. Well, one of the bad guys in the Doctor Strange movie. I think if people really wanted him, you could get around the fact that he's already been in the MCU by just keep the mask on, because, until, again, we're going to gush about Hickman a lot, I think, but until Hickman's Secret Wars, you never see Doom's face. And so I think you could just keep the mask on him if you wanted and have him in that role. But I actually went with, I went with Lucius Malfoy himself, Jason Isaacs.
Good one.
Thank you. Yeah, it took a while. And it took a while to land on this one. And this one I obsessed over because I love this character so much, because I think he's so vital, and because I think that even though you could do Fantastic Four stories without Doctor Doom, I don't think you can have the Fantastic Four without Doctor Doom. You have to know he's out there. You have to read these characters in the context of, there is this guy, Victor, who has had such a major impact on their lives. And I think Jason Isaacs could be I think he could be charming and sleazy at the same time. I think he could be a tyrant and a benevolent tyrant at the same time. And that's the thing about Doom, is that he rules his country with an iron fist and is a terrible human being, and yet his country is so orderly and so, he's a supervillain with diplomatic immunity. That's so good. And I think Jason Isaacs could bring depth to that. I think he could bring it to life. I do not want to profane the name of Walter White here and say that Cranston couldn't do it, because I think he absolutely could. But my pick was Jason Isaacs for Dr. Doom.
I like it.
Okay. Last casting question, and then we'll give a few minutes to plot possibilities, and then we'll wrap up here. Who would your pick be for Galactus? Who's going to wear the silly hat?
Okay. I was just thinking about guys that have awesome, deep voices.
Me too. Go ahead.
Okay. And I picked Will Arnett for the sole reason he could say, Canada with club sauce.
That's so good. Oh my gosh.
My other thought was Dennis Haysbert from 24 fame, also the Allstate guy. You're in good hands,
Yeah, he was the president maybe on the
first couple seasons of 24. Yeah.
Yeah, I first time I ever watched 24, it was with family, and my wife's brother-in-law was in the room, and he's like, we're watching the first episode ever, and someone's trying to assassinate him. He goes, "Oh yeah, he's the best president ever. Wait till next season." I was like, so he survives this assassination attempt, eh? And that's kind of what I always think of with him. I went for mine with Keith David, who also has an awesome voice. And if you don't know who Keith David is, play any video game ever where they needed a character with a scary deep voice or an imposing deep voice.
He's like the military voice in like tons of stuff.
If you need someone to be a drill sergeant or a general, you go find Keith David. I think he was the bad guy in The Princess and the Frog.
Yes, he was.
He was
voodoo juju boo boo.
Yeah. He was also I cannot remember a ton of the names of any of the characters, but he was in The Thing, which is such an awesome movie. I love The Thing. The Thing in this context being different than the character The Thing being the horror film from the 80s. But Keith David, I think, could just do the voice. And really, I do want to throw in here, I need Galactus. You've got to lean into it. You have to embrace that you're a comic book film. And there are some things you can be tongue-in-cheek about and other things where you need to just give it to us and let us deal with it. And I think Galactus is one of those. And if you're going to do Galactus, I need a giant man who eats planets and wears a purple Pope hat. Don't give me this cloud stuff. I want Galactus to be Galactus. And I want to see Keith David in that purple outfit just mowing down on some planets. This
Galactus, if you're going to put him in there, is one of those ones that you need to, like, don't try to change his costume. Don't try to do something like he needs to look that way.
Yeah, lean into it. It's silly. We get it. But you know what? We were willing to suspend disbelief enough to say that a guy who is a rock could still breathe. So maybe trust us that we can suspend it to believe that there's a giant planet-eating man.
Definitely.
So to kind of wrap up here, where would you've alluded to this time travel concept a few times. Where do you want to see him go with plot in this thing?
Okay. We're talking here. What I would love to see, if I'm, mapping this out, right, is that the Fantastic Four exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're not in it. Okay? We kind of have like an Earth 2 or an Earth 27 or 4515 or whatever. And you put the Fantastic Four and all of the mutants on that planet. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
My ultimate vision that I think that Marvel has to do at some point is do an Avengers movie and do Secret Wars. And then from Secret Wars is then when you can fold in the Fantastic Four and the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay? Only for so much longer are we going to be able to do stuff with like Captain Marvel where, this movie was set in the 90s before any of this other stuff happened and she's been just popped in space. Like, eventually we're going to get to the point, here's these super powered people. Like, why weren't they around whenever Thanos was knocking on our door?
Yeah.
So I would love to put them on the Ultimate Universe. If this is Prime, if this is 616 for you comic book nerds, the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we've been using, then put the Ultimate Universe, which is what, 15, 16 or something like that?
Something like that. I could never remember what theirs was. I know it's in the thousands.
Yeah. Put the Fantastic Four and the X-Men on that one. And where I would love to see them go, a few things that I would love to see. To get to Secret Wars, we have something where Franklin is a big part of this, and his powers are just becoming out of control, and he creates, these small pocket universes, and then basically that just gets out of hand. And from that, then Reed goes and he meets with the Council of Reeds, which this is one of Hickman's crazy ideas that is fantastic, where Mr. Fantastic, he transports himself kind of into like the middle of the known universes, basically. Mm-hmm. And he meets with all of the Reed Richards from all of the universes, and they just try to solve stuff, basically. Like, there's one that is wearing the Infinity Gauntlet in the comic. There is one that I think is the, Sorcerer Supreme, like Doctor Strange. I mean, just have all of these characters. So they're trying to deal with that. And then from Franklin creating these universes and what Reed does with the Council of Reeds and stuff, then you get the incursions, which lead up to Secret Wars, which is where these two planets are trying to exist in the same plane, and then they can't. So one of them or both of them have to die. And then that leads us to Secret Wars, which then would fold in the Fantastic Four and the X-Men in this purpose into the main MCU. So totally taking Hickman's stuff and just kind of extending it and using it. But those, I would really like to see, Franklin being a big part of this, and maybe include them in the X-Men movies, put them at Xavier's Institute, when they're young, to have Xavier kind of, help them hone their powers a little bit, for a little crossover there. Anyway, and then just seeing Bryan Cranston as Doctor Doom, who is, God over everything, would just be so cool.
I like it. I'm really weirded out by this because this is really, really similar to what I have proposed in the past as the way to resolve bringing the X-Men and the Fantastic Four into the MCU. And I have said myself, use Secret Wars. Kind of what I was thinking would be, I'm intrigued by your idea because you took it and really ran with it. I actually had it as kind of, what if we did a Fantastic Four movie and through the whole thing, you never address the elephant in the room. You let the audience keep waiting for it, and you never address, wait a second, how are they doing all of this? They've been around for years. Why do they not know about the Avengers? Where were they with Thanos? And then for your after credits scene, you have somebody on the Avengers, maybe it's Bruce Banner, maybe it's Doctor Strange. Somebody is like, holy crap, I've discovered this other world. There's people there like us. And then you can do a cut to black. And now you've set up, okay, we're going to resolve this down the road. But right now, all you need to know is parallel universes, which is a comic book staple, whether you're doing DC or Marvel or whatever. The alternate realities thing is really the bread and butter of how they resolve all narrative conflicts and all continuity problems.
I love that idea. And
I just want to see them lean into it.
Way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to see them embrace, and this is one thing I've loved about the last decade or so about these films, is that we've gotten away from the early 2000s need to rationalize comic books, where, as actually, little weird fact, Nick and I saw the original X-Men together. I don't even know if you remember that. I was actually there with your brother, but I remember they didn't do the crazy costumes. They did these dark gray utility things that are yeah, that's what you'd wear on a stealthy black ops mission for mutants. And that was cool and all, but we're at a point where if they did that movie today, I think you'd see Wolverine in spandex that's yellow. And I think nobody would even question it. We'd be like, yeah, that's what Wolverine wears. Exactly. And I love that we're embracing the inherent silliness and the comic bookiness of it. And I want to see them do that with this upcoming dilemma. I don't want to see, now we're going to introduce the Fantastic Four, they're brand new heroes. Now we're going to introduce, mutants have been among us the whole time, but we just didn't know. I want to see them really lean into that idea of alternate universes, because you also that way get to silence the, we know you're out there waiting for us, angry fanboys on Twitter that will do like they've done with Star Wars and rant and rave about their lost alternate universe of stories. And you can just say, hey, it's all still out there. This is just a different universe.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like that idea of somehow having some big cosmic event that brings everyone together, and trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Rather than just trying to, oh, hey, you were here all along, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nick, it has been a blast. It has been a pleasure and a privilege. And when Mitch kicks me to the curb, I think our listeners will be in good hands. I have had a great time. Nick, do you have you mentioned Gotham Central. Do you have any other kind of projects going that you want to take a minute to plug here? Just so, I think our listeners have certainly enjoyed you. What else do you do if there's anything right now?
I mean, No, nothing comic. Nothing comic related. But yeah, the Gotham Central podcast is one that I sometimes am a part of. That's way more comic and pop culture kind of heavy podcast. But if you want to check it out, it's Gotham_Central, I think, on Twitter. I don't
That's
know.
all. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this tonight, Nick. And for all of our listeners, thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for listening, and go out and find some comics to read, some movies to watch. Be sure to rate and review us on whatever your selected platform is for listening to this podcast, because, that's the nice thing to do, and it helps us get better noticed. And the more noticed we are, the more people you're going to have to talk to about this insanity. So thanks again. Mitch is going to be back with us next week, and we're going to resume our Luke Cage marathon. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.